guys, we're back. It's another episode of the Fearless Pursuit of Freedom podcast. And today's guest is luxury spec home builder out in Portland, Oregon. I'd like to introduce you guys, Tucker Merrihew. Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I know we're just getting to know each other, but hey, that's the best way to record a podcast, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's why I like doing it. I mean, not only did my audience get to learn, but I get to learn. And it's easier for me than going to 1,000 networking events. I just find badasses on Facebook and interview them.
I've been doing that for 5 years. It's the greatest thing you can do. So
awesome. Okay, so you're in Portland, and from last seen on Facebook and a brief conversation beforehand, you build spec custom homes and some rehabbing, but I'm sure you didn't start there. Could you rewind some time and tell us why you got into it and why real estate and kind of like the evolution of how you got where you are, and kind of like for me personally, like I said, single family flipper, wholesaler, luxury thing is something that has always been appealing to me and many others, but not quite there. So I'd like to learn how you got there and why you chose luxury instead of, say, going to maybe apartments or whatever, or maybe you do apartments too.
It's a long story, so I'll give you a little bit of the trimmed down version that people will like to hear. But yes, I'm in, as they call it, Portlandia, or the Portland metro area. If anybody's seen Portlandia, the TV show, everything that they spoof on there is in fact true. They come here and just hang out, and that's how they get show ideas. So if you saw it on there, that's how a lot of people are here. They have a very Portland people have a very, not all, but a good chunk have a very distinct flavor and type. And so they do a good job of casting that on the show. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out.
Look at it.
Now, in terms of what we do, it's been a long process. I've been in this business for, I guess I'm one of the old, I'm not that old. I mean, I'm only 39, but I've been in this business since I was 22, 23. So I've been through, the real estate collapse of 2007, later 2007, 8, 9, and kind of built this business now out of that. I was in real estate before that. I owned a mortgage company. I had done a number of flips and live-in, house hacks and things like that on the run-up, made a good amount of money. But I built this business, which is TTM Development Company, started it in 2008 at basically the shit of the shit, we'll call it, right? When everybody was running, there was no such thing as wholesaling because you couldn't sell it to anybody. Nobody wanted to buy anything. Right. Nobody started buying from wholesalers until maybe late 2009, because that's when people started to come back to the party a little bit. But we started in 2008 actually buying, rehabbing, and retailing, which was a very questionable venture back then in most people's eyes, because they didn't feel like there was a retail market to buy a finished product at a high price point, or not high, but we'll call it higher than REO, right? Higher than scream and deal price point, which there was a lot of out there. And what we found out is that there were two markets running side by side. You had your distressed market and you had your turnkey type market, which is move-in ready. Yep. And the pricing on those was very different. And there were different types of buyers for each of those markets. And so what we did is we'd go buy in the distressed market and we'd sell in the turnkey market, or finish, move-in ready market. And so in 2008, I started what is now today TTM Development Company. And we basically started buying little hood houses that were kind of like you mentioned, your buddy builds 1,200 to 1,800 square foot simple houses in northern Arizona. We were buying simple one-level ranches that were, 1,000, 1,200 square feet, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And we were just banging them out one after another. And we'd buy them for $120, $130. We'd sell them for $199, and we put 20 to 30 into them. And we were just doing one after another after another. And so that's kind of how I got some experience in figuring out this world of construction and rehabbing, and ultimately adding staff and people and running crews and kind of going through the growth process of what's the best way to do that. And then eventually we started graduating to a little higher price points because we could generate higher margins. You can only make so much money on a $199,000 house. I mean, you could hit a home run and you could do well, but generally you're going to make, let's call it 30 grand, 40 grand if you're lucky, right? And you hit one really good. And so we wanted to start climbing. Our capital base was growing. The ability to go to lenders was growing. And our overall abilities as rehabbers was growing. So we decided to climb the real estate ladder, as they say, and really kind of to a higher price point. So we started renovating houses that were, we were exiting for mid 3s, low 4s. And then eventually we did a house that we exited at 750 in 2010. And in 2010, 750,000 in Portland was an expensive house, especially considering the market hadn't really come back yet. And it was a real telling experience because it was in a great area, but we sold it in an hour, and we sold it to somebody that had cash and just wrote a check for it. And we ended up making, I don't know, 150, 160,000 when the dust settled on that deal. And it was kind of an eye opener for me in terms of, okay, well, you can sell higher end, nicer product, even in a not so great market, as long as it's in the right place and it's the right house. And so from there, we started looking around, and we were like, well, where else can we do these deals? And there weren't a whole lot of areas where you could do it. But one thing that was just starting to happen about 2010, 2011 was this phenomenon called infill new construction. Prior to that point, it didn't really happen here in Portland. The only type of new construction that happened was like larger neighborhoods, because builders could come in, they could buy big pieces of dirt, they could plat it to a bunch of lots, they get their dollar cost average per lot way down, and then they can absorb the building costs and make a margin. If you just bought a one-off lot somewhere, based on what our permit costs are and construction costs and the end value of that product, it was really hard to just build one house and make a margin, because there wasn't enough room and value based on what all those other costs are. About 2010, 2011, that started to change in certain pockets. There were higher price points that were getting posted. There were a few builders that had tested that higher market or that higher price point for new construction and started to proof the concept. And so what we did is we basically followed suit after we saw another builder in town that was doing it. And, the first one that we did, it was unintentional. We were going to rehab the property first, but it had what they call blue clay, which basically means that there was a lot of settling in the foundation. There was really no way to fix it without removing the blue clay, bringing in new soil and gravel and compacting it and just making it right. Wow. And that's hard to do when you have an existing house with a full basement under there. It just makes it really difficult. So we said, screw it. We jumped in, we scraped the house, we built new construction. We ended up selling that new construction for about $600,000. And that was the start of basically having a two-pronged attack in how we do our business, which is building new construction on one end and doing renovations on another. And so a lot of people, they wholesale and rehab. Wholesaling is the quicker money, right? Rehabbing is the longer money. For us, it's just a little bit different version of that. Building land development is longer term money. Rehabbing is quicker term money. So right now we do kind of probably 60% new construction, land development, 40% renovations. And so it's a balancing act of that. Now it's almost like two different businesses in a sort, because with rehabbing, we've also been our own general contractor for going on 9 years now. So we run our own crews, we run our own subs, we do all the project management and design in-house. But we have to carry a little more labor when we do rehabs versus if we do new construction. Most all of it can be subbed out. So they're a little bit different businesses, but we found a way to kind of create a hybrid model. And that's really what we do. And, since 2011, 2010, 2011, we started that first new construction. We've now gone on to build, a bunch of different multi-million-dollar homes. We're currently building one right now that'll probably exit somewhere around 3.2 million, which, in California and the coast, that's nothing. But in Portland, that's a high price point. And so our specialty is, basically we have the know-how, the design, the capital to be able to build these multi-million-dollar homes. But we also do a lot of, bang them out renovations, because, it's 2-3 month money that we can turn over and make good margin as well. So that's kind of the business in a nutshell. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know where to start with that one. That's a lot, because your first one, you sold it for $650, you said. Almost accidentally, didn't intend on that. Obviously, you got the house cheap enough to where that made sense and the neighborhood made sense. And you kind of pick the neighborhoods where you end up doing that. Are you choosing areas that are what they're calling gentrifying areas, where they're beginning to go up in value, or it's already an area where generally the 5 and 1% people of the world will move into? It's a wealthy neighborhood to begin with?
I would say that's changed over time. When we first started doing it, we were pushing the envelope in terms of those areas that were gentrifying.
Yeah.
At this point, I think we're in kind of the ninth inning of an upcycle. And so we don't necessarily want to be pushing the edge of the gentrification and the price point proofing. So we'll sag back a little bit, and we'll, build less, but do it in more high demand, proven areas that aren't in the middle of gentrification now. They've already gentrified, right? Or the values have already increased, the desirability is already higher. So that's how we insulate ourselves. There's a lot of builders that, are building on the edge and they're continuing to push the envelope and the price points, but that's just not the business that I want to run, heading into the last part of 2019.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, we're 2 years past what was supposed to happen 2 years ago. I mean, a 7-year cycle. I mean, we're overdue. So, I mean, I wouldn't be pushing it either. What was it just a natural evolution of time and capital raising where you went from a 650 to a 3.2? What made you progressively go up a couple million there?
I mean, that was a slow grow, we'll call it, right? The first one we sold for, we started trying to sell it for 650. We ended up settling around 6, but it was a slow process. We did a number that were in the like 900 to $1 million range. And then we jumped up from there and we sold one for 1.8 million. And then we sold one for 2 million. And we sold a bunch kind of in that 1.5 to 2 million range. That's kind of the bread and butter for multi-million dollar homes in the Lake Oswego area, which is basically a nice suburb of Portland. The one that we're building right now is 3.2 million. It's in Dunthorpe. It's probably they call it the old money area of Portland, right? It's where like you have parts of town where people that want to appear to have money live, and then you have parts of town where people that actually have money live, right? And so that's the have money neighborhood. And so it's been a growth process. We have, more capital now available to us than we did before, but that's because we've proven our concept, we've proven our brand, we've made more relationships with people. It's just the natural evolution, of the business. And then of course, on the actual construction side, just because you have the capital and the ability to do it on that end, it doesn't mean that you're actually ready to build a high-end home, because you've got to have the architectural intelligence, you got to have the design intelligence, you got to have the real estate IQ to make sure that you're doing it on the right lot, the right plan, the right area. So, all that stuff over time we got better at as well. Tweaking and understanding, what does the high-end buyer want on all those different levels. It's hard to you can't just go from rehabbing to jumping into doing that. If you do that, you'll most definitely build a product that's not right. So it's a growth process on all sides, growing capital on one end and then growing your know-how and knowledge base on the other to actually be able to take, a raw piece of land or a lot and convert it into a multi-million dollar home. So it's been a growth process all around.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing with rehabs like I do. I've got one crew I can rely on pretty heavily and a few others in the back burner. But if I put them in a $500,000 house, it's going to turn out a crappy product. But I know if I stay under 250, it's solid all day. You start creeping up and then you're like, oh, you start worrying about having to come in and redo a bunch of things or finding somebody new to specialize in, craftsmanship and stuff. And I wouldn't be, like I told you before, I wouldn't be ready for that evolution. And then you got to know what's selling. You don't want to, you're building nice, modern, contemporary in a neighborhood that probably justifies it, but you don't want to say, go in your neighborhood and build like a Victorian style dollhouse looking place. It just probably wouldn't sell there. So you definitely got to know where and how and who to use for those builds for sure.
For sure. And it's, a lot of people that do like higher volume rehabs, like they have the same selections on every house, right? They're just bam, 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 because they want to conveyor belt the business, which is fine, but you can't climb the real estate ladder if that's the business you're going to run. Like you need to stay in the median home price and under homes, and that's the business you run. If you're going to go to the higher price points, now all of a sudden that business model doesn't work. And so, there's a flipper that does a high volume of flips that's doing a renovation behind one of the high dollar houses we're building, and he put call it a $300,000-$400,000 crew on a $1.2 million home, and it's just I go by there, I'm just like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? And he'll learn, but he took the plunge. He went outside of where he should have, and but he took a leap of faith. He bought a house at auction that he shouldn't have bought, and he tried to sell it on MLS. Nobody bought it, so he was forced to rehab it. So now he's rehabbing it with a $300,000-$400,000 crew on $1 million home, and he'll feel it eventually. So
I know I cringe when I walk in, even like in my price point where I'm trying to stay around the 200 to 300,000 right now. I'll walk into some comps and I'm like, oh, thank God my guys are better than this. Now I got this this weak comp over here that's going to sell for what I want to sell for, but it's got crappy renovation. So I know mine's going to sell.
Right. But I mean, that's a maturation process too. For you to be able to identify that means you have grown yourself, right? So it's,
Right.
the guy that did that probably is posting pictures on Facebook saying, check out how awesome my flip is.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I see people in my feed that are like, check out my finished product. And I look through the pictures. I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And they're so proud of it. And all their friends are like, dude, it looks awesome. And it's like, that is the worst shit I've ever seen.
Right.
You just don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. Yeah. You start to look at these pictures like, why'd you leave the baseboards or why'd you leave that one all wonky? You start to recognize some things that you wouldn't let slide on your builds.
Yeah. My favorite is the flip this house red front door. It's like, dude, don't paint your front door red. Just don't do it.
No, actually, surprisingly, we've never done that.
That's good to hear. I'm not insulting you then.
No. Yeah. I don't think we've done black and teal. And teal has been pretty much the color we've been going for. But anyway, so you said beforehand, you've got a marketing machine. So I assume you're wholesaling things you don't want, or how does that look? Because, myself, I struggle between either doing too many different marketing avenues or not finding one and concentrating on it. Is yours cold calling, direct mail? Like, how does that part of the business look for you?
It's been the same with a few additions for, we'll call it 8-9 years, which the basis of it is direct mail.
Yeah.
So we have kind of a multi-pronged system, but really what we do is we built this app. It's called the Driving for Dollars app, and that's kind of the basis for all of our marketing. And
right.
It essentially allows us to pick neighborhoods that we want to be in. We then drive those neighborhoods. We pluck out all of the, we'll call them visibly great leads that we want to buy. And then we deploy direct mail to those people. That's the base, the kind of the foundation of the marketing. Then from there, we run a lot of ringless voicemail campaigns. We'll do, some email follow-up. We'll do some text messaging. But really the foundation and the most stuff that we do is direct mail, which most people don't want to do because it's a little more expensive these days and there's cheaper ways for people to generate leads. But at the end of the day, it's been the tried and true method. It's not, we crank out mail every single day here.
Yeah.
We're not sending, 50,000 pieces a month, but we send out pieces to all of our, we'll call them farm areas. We just cycle through them, but we send out some form of mail every single day. And then we follow up that mail with ringless voicemails and some text messages and some email blasts and things like that. And that cycle of just doing it constantly generates a constant influx of leads. So, it's not rocket science. It's just staying consistent with it and having a system and just doing it every single day. I think the biggest problem is that most people just don't do it every single day, but we've been doing it for 8-9 years now. So it's just part of everyday operations. Just like when you come into the office and you turn the lights on, it's the same thing with our marketing machine.
Right. No, yeah, that's interesting. So actually, I forgot that you had designed the Drive for Dollars app. It's like a huge topic right now in DFW. It's probably it is the number one suggested app for any incoming new wholesaler or even experienced guys that do any type of driving for dollars. Well, you never mentioned foreclosure or probate in there, so you steer clear of the big popular niche list like that.
We don't really do much with foreclosure these days. There's a small subset. Well, I don't say small. There's a subset of investors that are still buying at the auction steps.
Yeah.
There's of course your subset that markets to NODs and people that are on their way to foreclosure to try and either grab some short sales they can negotiate or, cash for keys or something. There is that, but we don't really play too much in that arena.
Yeah.
We do pull probates every week, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of additional research to find out if the probate has property that we're interested in areas that we want to be. And if there are, then we'll start our direct mail campaigns to them. So we have a specific probate list that we create, but we don't mail all probates. We only mail the ones that are within the areas we want to be. So we do mail them. But what we found is that, with our Driving for Dollars, it kind of encompasses all different types of lists. You get people that are long-term ownership, you get higher equity, you get code violations, you get tax delinquent, you get probates, you get all these things with the visible issues with the property. And so it kind of overlaps a bunch of different lists. And so that's why we use that as our main lists that we've built over the years. And then we've got some, additional ones that we kind of pull that are specialty lists, we'll call them, that we kind of layer in there as well.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. So obviously you're not doing that yourself, the driving for dollars. Do you outsource that as a contract type of deal, or do you have one of your on-staff employees doing that driving for dollar? Is it a daily activity or weekly? Or
it's a weekly activity. We do it once a week, and we'll kind of pick out a new area that we want to go create a list, and Chris, my office manager, will go knock it out. So we do it, a day a week is what we shoot for, to get kind of a new area, new list created.
Yeah,
and that's how we do it. If I was a solopreneur and we didn't have people in the office, though, I would encourage people to do it themselves, because you've got to learn the areas, and so we're kind of in an era where everybody wants to outsource everything and do nothing.
Right.
And I feel like it's making a bunch of lazy, whiny, bitchy, moany investors that aren't really hitting the streets and honing their skill set. They just want to pull data, send RVMs, and have somebody call them that wants to sell them their house at 40 cents on the dollar. And it's like, I don't know, it's just creating this whole subset of pond skimmers, I like to call them. And it's like, this is what we do. You need to really get into, where it is you're marketing, the types of housing that's in those areas, where the value lines are. You really got to get to know what it is that you're doing. And so I think, personally, driving those areas, at least initially, it's a real education in terms of what it is you're looking for, what the area is like, who's rehabbing in the area, who's building in the area that you can make contacts with. I mean, you go do that for a couple of days, you can make contacts with a lot of people that you can either sell to or find out what they're buying for, what they're selling for.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of education in there that you can get for free versus, buying a program or a coaching program or, whatever, going to a flip this house seminar or whatever, right? Just, you just kind of do some work and, you'll be amazed at what you learn from it.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, knowing the area, because you'll know if you want to buy a house in that neighborhood or not if you drive through beforehand. I mean, you don't want to buy a house where you're almost certain you're going to get broken into, and you can kind of see how the other rehabs are going as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then do some back research, right? Like let's say you find 3 or 4 rehabs while you're driving around, you see they're getting worked on, find out who bought them, what they paid for them, who they are, reach out to them. You'll find out who overpaid, who underpays. If the overpaid people you want to connect with for sure, because guess what? They'll be great buyers for you, right? So it's like, there's a lot of like spider webbing that can go on there that can kind of help you build your business if you just kind of do some things on your own and not outsource everything. And you do need help with certain things, but I think that's one of those fundamental things that you can just learn a lot from spending, a couple hours a week doing something like that.
Yeah. Now we actually started incorporating, me and my fiance actually started doing the driving for dollars ourselves again, because it's the only way to know that you're actually getting a good list if unless you train them properly and all that jazz. But like we were just talking about, I want to know where my lists are going out to and whether or not I even want to be in that neighborhood or not.
Right.
Because we're trying to do less wholesaling and more buying right now. I think we got, in our area anyways, we got one last year of solid numbers, and next year we'll reevaluate whether or not we want to keep flipping or not. But
I think we got a year left or so. The Fed's buying mortgage-backed securities again, so that's a good sign.
yeah, definitely. As far as your new builds, I think that's the niche that I would like to talk about with you. I know we talked beforehand that the municipalities where you're at are a giant pain in the rear. What other types of hurdles have you had to go through on the beginning phases when you started building versus now? I mean, have you built those relationships where you can walk in and say, hey, I've got the new property, and it kind of goes streamlined, or is there always something that goes wrong with a new, like bringing in service or impact fees or what have you on those areas?
I mean, there's always challenges. It's just, you kind of know what to expect a little bit more, but you're still going to face the same challenges. I mean, the biggest impact fees are huge here. They're some of the most expensive in the country. I mean, we'll pay $65,000 for impact fees for a building permit for a newly created lot in Lake Oswego. We pay $55,000 in the city of Portland, which is crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you can see now how we have to pick certain neighborhoods because not everywhere can absorb that kind of cost before you even put a shovel in the ground, right?
Right.
And so the the really intelligent, people that run the city here don't realize that they're creating neighborhoods with haves and have-nots by creating that type of fee structure where, they're just concerned about, paying their own bills and lining their own pockets more than they are about actually creating a city with in-between housing. Yeah. So that's the biggest challenge. Number one is kind of factoring that in, and then of course, excavation is a big thing, right? That's the thing that most rehabbers don't know much about. Excavation, foundation, those types of trades, utilities, bringing all that stuff in. Those are big kind of X factors. But to kind of hedge against that, if you're getting into new builds, doing stuff like your buddy does, he's probably building on flat lots and he's building simple plans, right? So if you're in a heavily gridded, let's call it closer in area, there's just only so much excavation that's required. If you start going on bigger lots that have a lot more, topography to them, now you could miss the mark pretty heavily on the amount of excavation that it's going to cost. And excavation costs a lot of money these days. So that can be a budget buster. There's unknowns, but you get better at kind of knowing those. And then of course, the smaller and flatter the lot, the less unknowns you have. But you still have to factor in those, huge impact fees that we have and just making sure that all utilities are there. You've got sewer, you got stormwater, you got electrical, you got gas, you got water, you got all those things, right? And so you have to understand where they're at, how to connect to them, costs involved and all that. So it's, it's a learning process, but it starts to get somewhat predictable. The big house that we're building right now that will be about $3 million. We had an idea on excavation there. We were thinking it'd be somewhere, 120, 130, and it ended up being 180, right? So, and that's with years of experience. It just run into stuff, Right. So it happens.
That's crazy. Yeah. How big is the house going to end up being? How big is the footprint?
It'll be a 5,300 square foot house when we're done on about an acre and a half. So
really, that's funny. So you're a lot like that, and then like you're saying that you worry about the topography of the property. Who's designing the water runoff on that? Is it the architects? Do you have an in-house architect, or do you hire that out?
So we do a little bit of both. We hire it out because we're not architects, but we work hand in hand with them to design plans. The plan that we're building there is actually one that we designed with an architect about 5 years ago, and we built in what's called the Street of Dreams here in Portland, which is like an annual show where builders basically build these super Mac Daddy houses, and they have 60 to 80,000 people tour through them over the course of a month. And so we built a house there. That house, we ended up selling it for more than anybody else on that street. We sold it for about $1.85 million. But that plan that we basically engineered and designed. We designed the plan, but our architect has helped us and got their name on it. Yeah. And it won Best House Plan in America by Builder Magazine in 2014 for houses over 5,000 square feet. So that's the house we're building now again, because it's a real winner of a plan. But to get back to your question, in terms of stormwater, we hire the architect to design the plan. Stormwater is then kind of twofold. You've got your engineers that kind of design the stormwater system, but you have geotechs that have to test the soil to determine how it is that you're going to deal with stormwater. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times in Portland, stormwater, when people think of stormwater, they think of pipes that go underground and connect to a storm system for the city. And that's not generally the case around here. Most municipalities want you to infiltrate on site, which means you basically are putting a giant tank in the ground, and all that water is going to a tank that has holes in the bottom, and it eventually drains out deep down under the ground.
Really?
Yeah. And so that's what your geotechs and your civil engineers will design. They'll design the system based on the infiltration rates of the soil and, what kind of system is going to be needed. And we could get into the weeds all day on stormwater, but most of the time there isn't a storm system to actually connect to unless you're right downtown in city of Portland. And even then, sometimes they want you to infiltrate on site.
That's crazy. I didn't even know that it even existed, a retention tank for stormwater.
They're called dry wells. So you don't even know they're there because they're 10, 15 feet in the ground and they're buried. But yeah, they're called dry wells, and they're a very common thing all over the country now for infill new construction. But you basically drain out all your stormwater underground, given that the infiltration rates for the soil are high enough to be able to absorb it.
Yeah. Okay. So all your downspouts are going to a pipe system around.
Exactly. And any, impervious surfaces that then have some sort of a drain that water goes to and eventually makes it down there as well. So,
wow, that's That's nuts. I've actually never heard of that, but of course I'm not building new houses or in that price range at all.
Well, I'm glad I could teach something.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. So you got, in Texas, we have horrible foundation issues. Doesn't matter where it's at. We slab, pier and beam, doesn't matter. We got this crappy black clay out here. And when it rains, it doesn't absorb very well. And then it dries and cracks. And so everything falls apart out here. And my buddy in Arizona, they're doing massive piers in their houses because they have more of a rock foundation, depending on where they're at. But how's your foundations look out there? Because you decided to demo that one house purely because the foundation was jacked. Is that, I assume that's a big concern for you guys?
Not as much. It's a little bit of a rarity. I mean, you guys build generally slab on grade type construction, right? So you pour a slab foundation and you just basically frame off of this concrete slab for the most part.
Right.
We don't do that here because it's wetter. So we have crawl space foundation. So you basically pour the perimeter foundation and then you set some piers and you set the floor joists and then you frame on top of that. So you can crawl around underneath there. You can set your plumbing in your crawl space, not in your slab. It's really, I think, an easier way to build because if you ever have plumbing problems, you don't have to jackhammer up your slab.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it makes, foundation problems less likely because you don't have that slab that's more susceptible to small changes in, soil, getting compressed or settling or whatever.
Right.
So we pour a perimeter foundation with big footings and that prevents a lot of it. Now, with that one I told you about, there was blue clay on the lot and it basically over time it just settled. So it does happen, but not that often. We don't find a ton of homes with foundation issues just because we pour those crawl space type foundations versus a slab foundation.
Wow. Really? I've had people or buddies that have had to go in the house and do a lot of demolition on the slab and re-pour, but I've never heard of anybody having just like, screw it, turn it out and having to start all over.
The challenge with that, the reason why we did it is because it was, 2010 and the solution here, which is normal for you guys, is you put piers in the ground, right? To kind of jack up the slabs and stabilize it.
Yep.
The problem here is that once you put piers under a foundation, it's kind of a black eye, right? It's saying this foundation had problems. We have piers in the ground to support it. Yep. And in 2010, that scared the shit out of people. Right. And so we were like, well, we can rehab this and put all these piers in the ground, but that's going to be tough to sell in the retail market around here because it's not the norm. It's not a normal thing. In Texas, it's a normal thing to, adjust your slab and push it up so that you're not having, 2 inches of difference of height from one end of the room to the other, right?
Yep.
But here it scares people. And so that's why we decided to just scrape the house, pull out the blue clay, recompact the soil, and then build new on top of it because I just felt it was going to be more of a risk trying to sell a house with as many piers in the ground as we were going to have to put.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's weird. Yeah, my buddy's always talking about is you found it because literally every house I've ever bought has had foundation issues, and I've had to put anywhere from 6 to 48 piers in the house, and it's normal. I mean, I walk in a house and I see it leaning in. And most people that aren't investors are freaking out. I'm like, no big deal. It's
a normal thing for you guys to deal with. And it does happen here. I mean, there's a company called Terra Firma that goes around and charges people like 10 times what they should to do that around here.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and we had a house last year that we rehabbed and sold, is that when they do that, they go down and the city then shows the permits for these piers in the ground and retail buyers get freaked out. They see that a house needs piers around here and it's like, oh my God, what's wrong with the house? So it's not as simple here on a retail end as it is there where it's much more of a normal thing and people are like, oh, okay, it's stabilized, no problem. Right. Here they're like, oh my God, what's going on with the ground?
It's going to fall in. Yeah.
So it's just, it's a little bit regional in terms of how people perceive that on a retail end.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'd like to get an idea of, we know what you're doing. You got the marketing, the rehab on the low end, and then the new builds on the high end. What does your future look like? Because like we just discussed, we think we have another year of a good, solid economy. I think there's a point between in my area anyways, between 500,000 and a couple million where that's like the iffy market. That's like the new money. Don't know how long it's going to last type of buyer to where you got the money. Though I think that market's always going to be there. And then the $200,000 market's always going to be there. Do you envision staying in your little niche in 2020 or?
It's a good question. We're going to change a little bit. We'll still do the right project in the right location, meaning we'll still build high-end new construction in the right lot, the right location. But we will more than likely, as the market changes, we'll probably shift into a little bit more multifamily type stuff, just mainly because I want to. It's more of a tax play at this point and just kind of a growth model. At a certain point, everybody gets there because they get sick of paying taxes, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of taking it year by year, and that's the thing that I've learned about this business is, you can kind of you can't plan too far in advance because you just don't know what's going to be. But given the market softens, we'll probably pivot a little bit into some multifamily stuff, but we'll still stay with our core competency. But right now people are just paying such ungodly amounts for multifamily that, we're going to stick to our core competency for the next year, and then we'll reassess at that point. But ultimately we'll get there eventually. It's just when we get there, I don't know exactly yet.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because we thought this was supposed to turn around on us 2 years ago, but here we are 9 years into a 7-year cycle. And we're like, well, what the hell's going on? Is it going to be good another year or not? And it's been quite crazy from what I've seen.
Yeah. And having gone through the last one and, basically built this business in the middle of the shit, we'll call it, right? There's a lot of opportunities in times like that. I don't think, who knows, maybe we'll see something as bad, maybe we won't, but there will be a dramatic thinning of the herd at some point. And so that's the point where, if we're going to pivot, that's when we're going to do it. We'll stick to our core competency until the herd thins, and then we'll take a pivot from there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like right now, state of Texas just now did the 2019 tax valuations. And I'm seeing a massive amount of investors go on the Facebook and post about they're anywhere between 70 and 200% increases year over year. And they're all losing their mind, justifiably. I mean, if they had a rental property that was cash flowing 300, it's gone now. There is no cash flow. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, there's some opportunity coming here pretty quickly.
Why did that happen there?
Just overall North Texas appreciation. I don't know. So I have a house right now, bought for 79. Its tax assessed valuation last year was like 58,000 with a 155 ARV. But even in just the past 3 months, that ARV has now moved to 170, and we got the 2019 appraisal at 120. So it went up 106% year over year. And I don't know if Texas is backlogged or just the major appreciation we've had the past few years has forced it. I'm not 100% sure, but
the reason why I ask is we have a similar problem, and so does everybody around the country. But the root of our problem, you have the appreciation that shows up on basically it affects taxable value as well as market value. But the biggest scam that's going on right now that ultimately is going to affect a lot of real estate values is bond measures. You get a lot of people that are pushing through bond measures in good times, and those bond measures really jack up your property taxes. And so we had certain parts of Portland last year that went up 13, 15% in a year. And so at a certain point, and this is the other thing with bond measures is that once you start giving money to somebody or something for some project, they never give that money back. That bond measure never goes away. They always re-up it for something else, and they just keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And that's, you pay money to the county and whatnot for your taxes, but then they have bond measures that attach to them as well. And that's also what jacks up your taxes. And so at a certain point, when property taxes get high enough, you realize that you've got a forever mortgage to the government, right? And that makes property less attractive in a lot of price points because that number can be so high. And so that we're teetering on that now. We also have, we're in a Democratic state, so we got punished by the new tax laws, which means that we're capped out at, $10,000 in state, income, property tax, whatever. And so a lot of these properties now that have high property tax, we can't get a full deduction or any deduction on those taxes. Whereas before we could. So if you're paying 15, 20 grand a year in property taxes before, you saved at least $8,000-$10,000 on your taxes, right? If you're a high income 50%, payer in terms of tax bracket. Now you don't. Now you get nothing for it. So those higher
Yeah.
property taxes don't get offset by any of the advantages that you once had. So I think property taxes are the looming issue that's going to affect valuations, not only here in Portland, but, down in your neck of the woods too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a big deal for us because, well, I'm no expert, but Texas, there is no income tax. And so as these property taxes are raising up and people are having to spend $100, $300, $600 more a month on their mortgage, but their income isn't going up. I see a tremendous amount of foreclosures coming here in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, we have about a 10% income tax on top of that. So yeah,
Wow.
You can see how the plane is going to crash into the mountain eventually. It's a matter of time. So.
It's coming. I want to talk about your Driving for Dollars app real quick. I know some guys that use it, and I'm pretty sure they told me that it does do phone numbers as well.
Yeah, so we, as of the beginning of this year, we integrated, it's basically skip trace data. So it pulls who owned it, or who owns it, what their mailing address is, their phone numbers, landlines, cell lines, email addresses, IP address, last sale date, pretty much everything that you're going to get from a skip trace. So that was the new enhancement. We did have, in full disclosure, we did have it set up as an unlimited data type program. Problem is we had a lot of people abuse that with the advent of RVMs and text blasts. People were pulling data based on the ability to send out all that cheap marketing versus actually using it for what it's meant for, which is visibly adding great leads via Driving for Dollars. Yeah. And so we've had to institute a cap, and we've got some tiered pricing coming in because human nature got the best of people, and we just can't let them run wild at my expense. So we are instituting that, but it's a fantastic tool nonetheless, and it's still a hell of a lot cheaper than our competition for investors to use. But it's a great way to build lists and then essentially get skip trace data on all those leads so that then if you want to, you can send direct mail, but then you can layer your marketing with RVMs, text blasts, emails, and you can also do, IP targeting because it gives you your IP address. You can upload the emails to Facebook, run custom Facebook ads to certain lists in certain neighborhoods. You can do all kinds of stuff. So it's
really check the light bulb just went off.
Yeah. See, did I excite you?
That's cool.
We've been building this thing for 4 years. I mean, it's been a long road. Building apps is not easy. It's not cheap either, especially with as many moving parts as this is, and it being nationwide. I mean, we had to find, we're using a platform that allows you to not only identify properties in every state across the country, but then also be able to pull skip trace data on any of those properties. I mean, there's a lot of back end stuff going on there to create this thing, but we're at a point now where it's functioning really well and it works all over the country, and we're really proud of it.
Yeah, no, man, it sounds awesome. That was going to be my question: is it nationwide, and how are you doing? Is it like Landglide? Because like Realist or who owns like CoreLogic is a nationwide data. So I bet that was a huge hurdle, especially the skip tracing, being there's so many regulations behind it.
Yeah, CoreLogic, we used them last year for our nationwide data. Now we've, upgraded in terms of the data provider to be able to provide skip trace data as well. CoreLogic doesn't do skip trace, but they do have great property data. So they unfortunately don't have more than that they can provide. So we had to go outside of them in order to be able to offer nationwide data and also skip trace data on top of it. But they provided the data last year.
Cool. What was I going to say? Right. So you're skip tracing, you're getting numbers. So for me, I turned off my mass texting and RVM because I was unfamiliar and still not with federal and local laws that prohibit certain usage. Do you know them? Could you go into depth a little bit on that?
Yeah, so we use a system called Roar, and I'm real. I know the owner of that system really well, and I've been staying up to date. There was one court case last year, but other than that, it's really gray area still. There's been stories out there of people have been sued or this or that, but the reality is you can be sued for anything, right? And so when one person says something like that on Facebook and it runs like wildfire through everybody, right? Well, I've been sued countless times for stupid shit just because I'm in this business, and that's what happens. You're in the business long enough, you're going to run into assholes, and assholes sometimes have mothers, brothers, sisters that are attorneys, and guess what? They have non-billable hours and they can mess with you, and that's just what happens. And every time we've been sued, that's been the case. That's why. And so the same thing can happen if somebody, gets all bent out of shape because they get a message from you. For us, we just do everything that we can to make those messages sound as earnest as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So that they don't sound like a robo dial, and we actually pick up the phone when people call back, and we make it say there's no laws that say you can't call somebody and leave them a message asking if they're interested in selling their property. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a gray area right now in terms of whether or not you can blast tons of messages as robo dials, but who's to say that, if it's an earnest message that sounds legitimate and people pick up the phone when you call back and say, yeah, we called, how the hell are you going to prove that? Right. So at the end of the day, that's how we operate. Maybe someday they'll be illegal. I for sure. And if that's the case, then we'll just keep doing what we do, which is mainly direct mail. And, we'll do some emailing, some Facebook ads. We don't do a lot of texting right off because people get real angry around here about their text messages for some reason. Yeah. And so for us, since we're targeting leads that are in specific areas that are specific houses, we don't want to alienate ourselves from those prospects because they don't like the way that we're communicating with them because they're not ready to sell yet. So we found text messages generally piss people off around here as a first form of communication. So we'll use them as a second or third touch after we've made contact, but not initially because the leads we're going after are great leads and we just don't want to alienate ourselves out of the chute.
Right. Yeah. I think the texting works better for now motivation, like pre-foreclosure.
Yeah.
And whereas driving for dollars isn't necessarily now. So it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. And with the pre-foreclosure stuff, you might get some wily people that don't like it too, though.
I definitely had that. I got the callbacks and F you, F this. And I've had several people say they're going to sue me already. I'm like, I'm just texting, dude. You don't got to get so upset.
Yeah. I mean, when we first started doing direct mail and on my podcast, we used to have a segment called Direct Mail's Greatest Hits. People used to get as angry about text messages back in the day about direct mail. Mm-hmm. And the first message that I ever got when I did my first direct mail campaign was this guy that was like, if I was here now or you were here with me, I'd grab the nearest object and beat you to death with it. And I was like, Jesus, man, it was just a letter,
I know. Do you send that to AT&T and Sears when they send you stuff too?
Yeah, exactly. Right. But are you angry about Papa John's send you something? Right. But, exactly. At the end of the day, people eventually just become a little more, numb to it. And so we don't get a ton of people that are angry just from our letters anymore. They get so many from people that, we just do everything we can to stand out with them. And occasionally we get a crazy person, but, we don't get nearly as many as we used to.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. You've got a podcast. Tell us what it is, what it's about, and where we can find it.
Sure. It's called The Real Deals Podcast. It's Deals with a Z. We started it in 2013. I just recorded episode 260 yesterday. And so we basically do one a week. We've been doing it for 5+ years, and it's been an awesome journey. It's been a great way to meet a lot of people. We've built an entire mastermind community from it. I'm going up to a expo next week in Seattle to speak in front of, a whole ton of people, and, all because of just starting a podcast. Otherwise I would have never got to know any of the people that are involved in that or otherwise. So it's a really cool thing, not only to listen to, but to do. You've got a podcast as well. I'm sure it's opened a lot of doors. You've had a lot of conversation you would have otherwise, but it's just a really cool medium. We're in a time now where people can listen to this and we can connect like we are, where, 10 years ago, that wasn't the case, where podcasts were like, what, were you in your mom's basement with something? What is that? Right. But it's called The Real Deals Podcast, and it's been a labor of love for us for the last 5 or so years. And we have, a lot of interview shows, but a lot of just me kind of giving my 2 cents on the market, the world of investing and strategies and otherwise as well. So we got a whole bunch of episodes. People can go check it out.
Yeah. I think that's going to be my evolution next is figuring out some sort of topic to talk on. But only being 2 years in the game, I'm no expert, know a little bit about some of it. And that'll be probably the next evolution, because finding a new interviewee once a week and building that pipeline of episodes has become a task now. I'm at episode, you'll be actually 50. And so that'll be my next thing to keep the thing rolling without running out of content.
Well, I got to applaud you for getting to 50. Most people don't get anywhere near that. So you've crossed the threshold of difficulty already, which, it's a lot of work, man. 50 episodes is a lot of work to put together and produce and put out. And, 260 episodes it's a lot.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
But if anybody's doing it, including yourself, just keep doing it. It's a really cool thing. I'm glad that I started it. I'm glad that I keep doing it. And I happily spend the money to produce them and put them out every week. So
Yeah. You mentioned a mastermind briefly, and we're coming up in an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long. Can you tell us a little bit about your mastermind? I didn't have any idea you had one.
Yeah, it's called the DFA, or the Deal Finders Academy is what we originally called it, but it's kind of turned into the I don't know when you have an abbreviation for something, but we call it the DFA, and it's basically there's about 120 people from around the country that are all high-end investors that do all kinds of things, from new construction, rehabbing, wholesaling, multifamily. One of our members is in the Hollywood area. He's building insane multifamily stuff ground up and making millions and millions of dollars. We've got guys like Justin Silverio, Mike Sumsky, Elliott Smith, Anson Young, Jay Scott, a bunch of guys that are just really quality people that are a part of it. And we've had it in place since we started it in 2014. And, we probably have 50 members that have been with us since the very beginning. So it's a really solid group of people. And it's basically an online group. It's very inexpensive to be a part of. One thing I've learned along the way is that, free masterminds don't last. And so we have to charge something in order to continue to organize it, but also to keep the content good and the interaction good. Yeah. And so it's just a necessary piece. I know some people think, oh, you charge for it, why would you? But the reality is, if you don't charge for mastermind, eventually they fall apart. That's just the way it works.
You're going to get a bunch of tire kickers wasting time.
Exactly. Sure. And so we don't charge much. It's $199 a month. And, there's 5 years worth of content, questions, webinars, and everything else, and just a great group. So that's our mastermind group that we've had in place for a long time. And that's all because of the podcast that I started, just being able to connect with all those people.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. All right. And one of the last questions, how do people find you if they have questions, bringing deals, money, whatever?
The best way would be, I know Instagram's the cool place, right? But it seems like real estate investors hang out on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So you can just find me on Facebook, Facebook.com/Tucker Merrihew, or just search Tucker Merrihew and just send me a friend request. Mm-hmm. I usually get back to everybody that messages me on there. And that's probably the best way to do it. And then from there, you can spider web and find all the other stuff that we have going on. It's linked to my profile.
Cool, man. Yeah, appreciate it. And last question I ask everybody. If you had 6 months to live, what would you do with it?
Ooh, well, I would make sure that I go to the rest of the Blazer playoff games this year. Okay. That would be first and foremost. And, I probably sell off our portfolio and, just do whatever the hell I wanted for 6 months.
Right, exactly.
If I got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer tomorrow, that's probably what I would do. But hopefully that's not the case. So
right. Yeah, definitely. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you coming on. I definitely enjoyed it, learned a ton, and sure everybody else did as well. I appreciate it a lot, dude.
Well, hey, I thanks for asking me. I know, it's tough to get some people to say yes, but I always enjoy giving a little bit of time and hopping on other podcasts. So I appreciate the ask.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right, we'll catch you later.